Guys, how's it going?
Hi everyone.
This is our first video DT sharing, so hope we just wanted to share a few words that blessed us from Monday's DT and just want to share that with you guys. So we'll get started, jumping right in.
Okay, so the first thing that kind of stood out to me was in verse 1 where he says, I am the true vine. And I focused on the word true vine because I realized, yeah, there are other vines out there. And Jesus calls himself, though, the true vine. And reminded me of a time when this passage really impacted me. And what I realized was that I had been seeking, I had been attaching myself to other vines. And that other vine was marriage and wanting it. And then also it was career success and money. And I really thought, if I have those things, I'll be happy. But as I really struggled with those things, I realized, no, I've been seeking life in those different vines, and I'm not going to get that. And I was really struck by how it says here in verse 5 that apart from me, you can do nothing. And I realized, I need to attach myself to the right vine. And I've been seeking it all in the wrong place.
Associate, I think, with that in verse 2, every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And so whatever prevents us, I think, like I was thinking about, whatever prevents me from connecting more deeply in my relationship with God needs to be taken away. Or even here, the example of being pruned, it needs to be pruned away from our lives. I thought sometimes these things are not even necessarily sinful or bad things, but they could be things that just distract or deter or impede or hinder in my relationship with God. It can affect the desires, the affections of my heart, and kind of maybe even cool my heart. Pastor talked about that in a few MBSs ago as well. And we're just talking about how, decluttering our home, when we did that a few weeks ago, it was like that kind of cutting away of branches and pruning and just physical things, just to get rid of stuff that opened up a lot of bandwidth in our lives and time and energy, right? And then it's just similar, like how that works in spiritual ways too. There are things, hobbies, things that have interests that, frivolous news even, that I thought, like sports news sometimes, would be unnecessary for me to be so involved or engaged in, so that I could free up my bandwidth in my heart for people. And I think that's another way in which we can lose sight of being connected to the vine, and our resources are so limited, and yet we can waste them on these other frivolous things.
So another thing that struck me from this passage was how the word abide repeats so many times.
And let me just show you, because we were circling the text here in this other form here. It's about like 10 times or more that we see abide show up. It's a very frequent word.
Yeah. So clearly it's a big theme. And so as I was doing my DT, I thought about what does it mean by abiding? What does that look like? What are the characteristics of abiding? And one thing is that it takes a lot of time. It's not something that is rushed. When you abide, it means staying in one place and kind of lingering.
We're talking about how it's not a one-time deal, but it's a continual process, going back to remaining, staying. It's a continual thing.
Yeah, so it's ongoing. And then I thought about how this passage talks about what it means to abide. And the first place was in verse 7, where it says, if you abide in me and my words abide in you. So the first way to abide is abiding in the word. And that's a study that requires studying and thinking. There's mental energy, there's grappling that happens, and absorbing and understanding. And in the process, you evolve as you absorb and understand, and have to kind of adjust your life around what you're learning. And so there's that part where we are kind of malleable to that word. And so we abide. And then the second way the passage talks about is in verse 9. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Abide in my love. So abiding in my love. It's relational. And it means remembering the love and tender care. And being faithful to the memories of that person, of God, of how he's worked in your life. Being faithful. And so there's like that relationship aspect, and there's connecting that happens. And abiding in love is going to require stoking like a fire. So when you stoke a fire, you add wood and you poke at it to get the fire, hotter. And I was thinking about how that's what happens when you abide in love, because you're investing in it and you're treasuring memories of that person and appreciating more about that person. And I was thinking how this also, these two things are different aspects of what it means to be in a relationship. And I was thinking how, we can take a really one-dimensional view on what it means to abide. Because sometimes when I look at this passage, I just immediately think about, I just need to study God's word. But it's more than that. And we understand that in relationship. Like, for example, what does it mean to be a good wife? It's not just being a good cook or being really good about cleaning. It's about relating to that person and treasuring memories. And so there's all these different aspects to what it means to relate. And that's what abiding implies. There's a relational aspect to it. So when he says abide in love, that's what it's talking about. Just remembering the relationship, remembering how God worked in your life.
I think just a side point from yesterday's, or from the MBS actually, that we listened to, and saying God is love and that his character is love. And we see that worked out in our relationship with other people. So as we are actually loving others, we experience like the love that has come to us, goes through us to others, and then the love of God is manifest. God is manifest in our lives, just as Pastor had talked about in that MBS. And I think that's why the connection with abiding with him in love is so important as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then the third way is in verse 10. It says, if you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love. So it's keeping his commandments. And that's another way to abide. And I was thinking there's two different aspects to keeping his commandments. You can simply obey. And, that's okay too. And I find myself doing that a lot, out of duty or because I know I should. But you can also obey out of love and gratitude and knowing that, and just being compelled by, the gospel and gratitude towards God. And I was thinking in both of those ways, as I think about my own life, I really experienced my love for God growing and my understanding of the gospel. And
well, I was thinking, we're talking about how like keeping commandments, not something we always want to do. We don't always feel like it, even though like almost like, oh, it's duty and that's important. And we know the common example of like any parent who has to wake up in the middle of the night and feed their child or change their diaper. Like nobody wants to do that at that moment, but you push yourself because you're compelled by your duty, by your commitment to be that kind of father or mother. And you just need to obey and do that. And through that process, though, yeah, I think love develops and grows through that as well. I think overarching all of this is this idea of as we abide with God, what happens is, and one of the big ideas I think I see here is just bearing more fruit. And it's something that he wants us to do, to grow. Like growth is a big part of our Christian life. We're not meant to stay stagnant. And in these verses, verse 2, verse 5, and then again in verse 8, that we bear much fruit. Like that's what he wants for us, to thrive. And then ultimately that we would be joy and that our joy may be complete. Like God is into growth. He's into abundance, flourishing. And how do we do that? It's being connected to God through his word, through love, loving people, and obeying him even when we don't feel like it. And that's what growth happens. And I think a lot of these things is what it takes to grow. Like in his word, like Ellen was saying, just to be committed to DT, having a sacred time and space. That's helped us, especially in leading the church and our ministries, just making that time so important, distraction-free, no email, no text, just to be locked in, thinking about God's word, reading commentaries, and just letting it just feed our souls, as well as really trying to love people in ministry and even doing things we don't necessarily want to do or feel like it. I think that for us, we've experienced a lot of growth through that, because there's a lot of things I think we just don't want to do. A lot of times, I'll always say like prayer meetings, oh gosh, she just doesn't want to do it, but as she goes through it, she gets blessed and she really experiences God. And I think we've both experienced that as we've just lived this Christian life just a few years beyond some of you. And anyway, I think this is one of these timeless passages that we really, whenever you ask, oh, what's your favorite verse? She always says 15:5, John 15:5. So really appreciate this passage.
All right, that's it.
That's it. We'll see you guys. Bye.
Bye.